Truth Unveiled here, and today I'm keeping you updated with the world around you and letting you know that so much is going on all around us, and it's important to stay awake, aware, and alert to the world around us. And that's why I'm here at Express, because it even says Merkel must go. Germans plan huge demonstration over leaders' open door asylum policy, and this has to do with the migrant crisis, which we will be talking more about later on. German activists are planning to hold a huge protest in Berlin tomorrow against Angela Merkel's open door asylum policy, and this was reported today actually. And it goes on to say that thousands are expected to gather in the capital's historic Washington Square for an anti-immigration rally where they will be addressed by right-wing politicians. News of the gathering is being spread under the hashtag Merkel muss weg, meaning Merkel must go, which has been used more than 1,500 times in 24 hours, reaching hundreds of thousands of people. Police are preparing for crowds of around 5,000 people from across the country to gather in the capital city from 3 p.m. with counter demonstrations by anti-fascist groups also expected. So you see what? More police control. I wonder why that's the case. The march is being organized by a coalition of anti-immigrant groups in Germany, where fears had been stoked by a succession of terrorist attacks carried out by refugees. And we know, no, they're not terrorist attacks because we know who's funding them. But let's keep going. It has been sparked by Mrs. Merkel's refusal to alter her path on unlimited mass migration despite the atrocities, and has been quickly organized by mass movements online. But what if I told you that this is all part of the Zionist plan, and it's the part of the elite plan in order to bring about chaos in Europe, as we're seeing slowly but surely, as well as rioting and protesting. And if you don't think this is going to become a reality for America, well, it already is, because your government and military have already been bringing in so-called refugees through DHS trucks and buses, as well as UPS planes and other secret methods, and housing them in FEMA camps and other places to be later on used for their new world order. But it goes on to say that Germans have been sharing a poster for the demonstration, which shows a placard depicting Mrs. Merkel dressed in a burqa next to its slogan, quote, Merkel must go. Supporters will hear from right-wing speakers from across the continent and are demanding that Mrs. Merkel change course on immigration, introducing a cap on numbers and tough new security checks on asylum speakers. But that's exactly what they want. They don't want Miss Merkel getting rid of this. The elite do not want her to be getting rid of these immigrants, and that's why they're not getting rid of them, because they're fulfilling the plans of the New World Order. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you will after this. And when you have an influx of migrants and refugees, that means you have an influx of chaos in Europe, and that's exactly what the elite want. Just ask George Soros, because he's the one funding all of this to begin with, along with many others. But I'm here at Business Insider that also says the latest: officials seek stronger border control police. And what you will find is that what they're trying to do is increase the police, increase more military presence in order to turn everything into a new world police state, one world police state, literally. And it even talks about the latest on a series of attacks in Germany, and we know that they're all staged. But the Bavarian Interior Minister Joachim Herrmann has said that the so-called bomber who injured 15 people and killed himself at a music festival had enough material in his room to build at least another bomb. That's what they want you to believe, because they always want you to think that it's a lone gunman who's doing this, or a lone bomber, when we know better than that. But it's interesting when they talk about how they say that the Islamic State group is waging a brutal war of aggression against our way of life. Well, who's funding the Islamic State? Let's keep going. It also talks about how they're in investigation. But what's interesting is when it says this right here, that top security officials in Germany are calling for tougher security screening of asylum seekers, and have also announced that more police officers will be hired following 4 attacks in the country, 2 of them claimed by ISIS. At least that's what they want you to believe. So you see the problem, reaction, solution here. The governments cause the problem, and then they offer their solution of more security. In fact, also what they're not mentioning is that Germany has decided to change its constitution on their laws for bringing in the military, because they used to only bring in the military in times of national emergency, but now they can bring in the military in case of so-called terrorist attacks when we know who the terrorists really are. And the question is, what if this starts happening in America? What if this starts happening in the UK? What if this starts happening in many other places besides France and Germany? Because later on I'm going to show you that even France has a ton of troops in their country now. I wonder why this is always the case, because the best way to deal with an estimated 1 million migrants entering in, much of which is illegal by the way, the best way to deal with that is police and screening and more surveillance, courtesy the New World Order. And what they want you to get used to seeing is all of the military tanks and the military troops, as well as military vehicles. They want you to get used to seeing this stuff, folks. They want you to get used to seeing all of this because this is part of their plans. It's slowly but surely, and I hope you're seeing how this is a big problem and it's only escalating even further. And they're testing this in strategic locations before they finally decide to bring it to America as well as the rest of the world. But the question is, are you ready for this when it gets here? And my hope is that you are. But I'm here from NH Register, and it says Turkey's parliament on Thursday approved the 3-month state of emergency, which gives the Turkish president sweeping new powers. Did you hear that? He has said the state of emergency will counter threats to Turkish democracy, though critics are urging restraint because they fear the measure will violate basic freedoms. And that's all we've been hearing and seeing, because you never had rights or freedoms to begin with. In fact, the Turkish Justice Minister has even told broadcaster CNN Turk that the period of detention that most suspects can be held without charges will be extended from 1 to 2 days to about 1 week in the first stage of the state of emergency. So tighter laws, more draconian laws being passed in different places. The Turkish government has already imposed a crackdown that has included mass arrests, mass firings, and closing hundreds of schools allegedly linked to Gulen, who lives in self-imposed exile in Pennsylvania. So we see all of the crackdown, not to mention the media crackdown as well, because thanks to the military coup, they also cracked down on the social media networks in Turkey as well just a few weeks ago. And you don't think this is preparation? You don't think this is the elite's way of preparing to bring this to America? You don't think this is the Illuminati's preparation for all of this stuff? You better think again. Amnesty International also reports what's going on in Turkey, and I'm going to leave very helpful information in the description box below so you can learn more about what's going on in Germany as well as what's going on in Turkey, and more about the refugee crisis and how it's all staged and planned ahead of time for the Illuminati's New World Order. But it even says Turkey, intensified crackdown on media increases atmosphere of fear. And notice how mainstream media loves pushing the fear agenda. I wonder why that's the case. But it says as Turkey enters its second week of a 3-month state of emergency, the ongoing crackdown on civil society and the assault on media freedom has reached disturbing levels, said Amnesty International. Arrest warrants have been issued for 89 journalists. More than 40 have already been detained and others are in hiding. A second emergency decree passed on the 27th of July has resulted in the shutdown of 131 media outlets, and we just talked about that earlier. But it even says under a state of emergency, restrictions must be necessary, proportionate, and for a legitimate purpose. The provisions of the 2 emergency decrees passed this week fail all 3 of these tests. And why are we constantly hearing all about states of emergencies all over the place? Not just in Turkey, but also in France too, as you will see a little bit later. But it even talks about what's really going on in Turkey when it says, we reiterate our call for Turkish authorities to end ill treatment and torture of those being detained and allow international monitors to visit all detainees in the places that they are being held in. And then it gives some statistics of the Turkish backlash, and it even talks about the media outlets that have been shut down in Turkey, at least the arrest warrants, and how many people were killed and how many have been detained, as well as those who have been suspended or removed from their jobs because of this, which also reminds us of the shutdown that's going on in Venezuela as well. And we also talked about the detainees too here in the state of emergency that's for 3 months, as well as the pre-charge detention limit that was increased from 4 days to 30 days back on July 23rd as well. And as you can see, it's only getting worse worldwide. And I hope your eyes are really open to what's going on in the world around you, because this is some very serious stuff. And we know that it not only impacts those who are experiencing it, but it also impacts those around the world too, because it's only a matter of time until it comes knocking on your door, especially if you're in America and the rest of Europe, and even in Australia and New Zealand as well. But here I am from a title that was posted on the Huffington Post, which says a state of emergency is not the answer to a sustained threat, because there's always a threat. And it's not just Turkey that's in a state of emergency, it's also France as well. And honestly, folks, don't be surprised when it starts spreading to Germany too, as well as Europe and all the other places before it finally reaches American soil when it's a national state of emergency. But I'm here from a snippet of the Huffington Post, and I've talked about this before, but I will just reiterate it. And it says, in France, the state of emergency that has mobilized 10,000 troops for more than 8 months since November has resulted in 3,694 searches, only 7% of which have resulted in prosecution for violations of weapons or drug laws, 477 house arrests, 67 penalties, 56 detentions, and only 6 cases brought by the terrorism prosecutor of Paris, according to the Interior Ministry. A meager balance sheet in light of an ever more intense threat, an escalation that opens the door to all the excesses and fractures within French society, a situation that has been denounced for months thanks to the vigilance of lawyers, sentinels of our freedoms. And the reason I'm talking about this today is so that you can see exactly the bigger purposes and the reasons behind all this, and the main reason why there even is a migrant crisis, because it's all planned and it's all staged ahead of time, courtesy the elite at the very top. But I'm here at the IBT that says dramatic photos show the EU migrant crisis scenes in the Balkans in 2015 and in 2016. So we're going to be comparing and contrasting these scenes of the Balkan migrant crisis over the past couple of years, and I will leave the information in the description box below so you can take more of a look on this on your own time. But as you can see, this is how it was before, and this is how it was after to the left, before and after. But let's keep going, then and now. And as you can see, it's only getting worse in certain places. This is the after shot of the same place, and this is the before shot right here. And if we keep going even more and keep scrolling further, we even see it here once again, that this is how it looks after. And notice how the police are right there trying to detain everyone and contain everyone. But look at how it was before, and look at the same position today. I hope you see it. And then if we keep going again, we can see it once again right here. It's even in public cities as well, because this was before, and then this is the after, and this is what's going on now in many of public cities in Europe as well as in the Balkan places too. And if you keep going, you even see more. Like I said, I'll leave the helpful information below, because as you can see, this is even effective in train stations too in many public areas. Because of the migrant crisis, this is how it used to look, but now this is how it looks. As you can see, things are more crowded, and because it's more crowded, there's more security that's needed, more surveillance. What time do you think it is? It's time to wake up and see exactly what's going on in the world around you if you already do not. Now, I'm here also from a report that was back in October of 2014, and it comes from the IACP, which is the International Association of the Chiefs of Police, which talks about crowd control and crowd management, because yes, this is coming to America too. It's only a matter of time until it comes to America. And the reason I know that is because I've already gone over with you different government documents that prove this is what is preparing, and this is what the elite and military are preparing for. But I've also even gone over with you how they test everything and plan everything ahead of time, because it's no surprise or coincidence that France is now under an 11-month state of emergency with over 10,000 troops that have been deployed in France, not to mention how Germany is thinking about deploying its military, as well as Turkey too. Do you see what time it is? I hope so. But we're going to briefly talk about this document together. As you can see, it says the purpose of this policy is to establish guidelines for managing crowds and preserving the peace during demonstrations and civil disturbances. And this has to do with law enforcement and police officers and policing in America. The policy will strive to effectively manage crowds during demonstrations or civil disturbances to prevent loss of life, injury, or property damage and minimize disruption to persons who are uninvolved. Is that really the case, though? Officers encountering such incidents shall adhere to this policy to protect life, liberty, and the exercise of First Amendment rights. Well, what if I told you that they threw out your First Amendment rights long, long ago? But let's keep going. Now, these are the brief definitions that they give. As you can see, they define civil disturbance as a gathering that constitutes a breach of the peace or any assembly of persons where there is a threat of collective violence, destruction of property, or other unlawful acts. And they also define demonstration as a lawful assembly of persons organized primarily to engage in First Amendment activity. And it talks about marches or protests as demonstration, and also crowd control, which is techniques used to address civil disturbances to include a show of force, crowd containment, dispersal equipment and tactics, and preparations for multiple arrests. And then also we have crowd management, which is techniques used to manage lawful assemblies before, during, and after the event for the purposes of maintaining their lawful status through event planning, pre-event contact with group leaders, issuance of permits when applicable, information gathering, personnel training, and other means. And then they also talk about impact projectiles, which are designed and intended to deliver non-penetrating impact energy from safer than contact range. These may include direct fire or non-direct skip-fired rounds. The latter are projectiles that are discharged toward the ground in front of a target, theoretically delivering the energy to the subject following contact with the ground. So yes, they even talk about how they even plan to use contact and use of force, because the United Nations now has the so-called legal right where their troops can now use of force in any type of civil unrest. And we also know that they're getting ready for civil unrest through the Jade Helm and the UX drills, not to mention certain government documents that I've already gone over, such as FM 3.19-15, which is the civil disturbances courtesy your army, not to mention FM 3.39-40, which is also military preparation for martial law, as well as Operation Garden Plot, Operation Cable Splicer, and the National Defense Resource Preparedness Act. If you don't know about this, I highly recommend you watch my videos that I'm going to link in the description box below so you can learn more about this and so that you can see what is about to take place. Please seek Yahuwah and his true son Yahusha so you can be prepared for what's to come. But this is Truth Unveiled here saying shalom.